United Democratic Movement has announced Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba as its Gauteng Premier candidate ahead of the 2024 general elections. The businessman is joining me now in the studio, who joined UDM recently, and you would have heard General Bantu Olomisa after he joined, having nothing but glowing remarks for him. Well, he's in the studio with us now to unpack his plans, if it is indeed for a new political party that is his home. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me, Thabo.
Well, let's start maybe firstly at the decision, right, of being a part of the UDM when you look at all the parties that are there.
Well, I think perhaps I should start with the fact that for a while I was in denial. A lot of my friends had indicated 2 years, 3 years ago that, I need to consider going into politics. And I said, no, I'm okay with the business activism side of politics, because that's what I've always been. Right. And having come back from my trips overseas and doing the things I was doing, I thought, you know what, for a change, I can just chill and pay attention, manage my son, who's a musician, because I used to be in the music industry, you would know, back in the day. He's an up-and-coming, hip-hop artist. I'm going to make up for lost time. And then, I think it's a combination of things. I think when you come back home and you don't keep leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back, and you're now at home permanently, you get to read more newspapers, you get to watch your shows, you get to hear what's happening. I've had personal experiences of things that have happened in the last 16 months that I just was shocked by to start with. And then I think maybe there's a build-up. And then around about November, December, I started getting a lot of parties that were actively recruiting me to join them. Whether it's direct messaging on my WhatsApp, or it's on my LinkedIn, on the private side of LinkedIn, on the DM side. But one or two actually came straight on X, on what used to be Twitter, and started, saying, hey, maybe you should join us. And I thought, no. So my initial reaction was, guys, I'm busy with my stuff. Leave me alone. But I think slowly but surely, your mind starts engaging and accepting that maybe that's something you need to consider. And February, when we had the State of the Nation address, I'm invited to a TV channel to go and be, I think they call us a friend of the channel, to analyze the State of the Nation, do a pre-State of the Nation address kind of preview, and then we did a post analysis. And as I'm watching the post, we're doing the post analysis, they go over to Parliament and they keep crossing over the things that you guys do. And then I see a guy and I'm looking at him and he starts talking and I'm listening, and I say, well, sorry, who's that? So they say, no, that's the deputy president of the UDM. Yes, Mdwaba. I said, oh, I think he's speaking a lot of sense. So the guy next to me says, yeah, he does. So then I look at him and say, I think that's the party I should consider if I am going to join any party, And by join, I meant, I'd never really been an activist in the ANC. Although I'd done a lot of things for the ANC. The Rivonia Heroes branch of the ANC used to meet in my offices, for example, and the Youth League, the Women's League, and everything. But I wasn't like a really very, activist kind of guy. So I thought, maybe there's a party I can just go to where I can be able to add some value. Yes. Then this was a Thursday, I think. The Friday, I go through doing some research, because then I remembered, Bantu Olomisa, when he started the party many years ago with somebody I knew, but I wanted to check, is it something that I will feel right with? And indeed, as I checked from the track record, the pedigree of the party, I thought, from a moral regeneration point of view, in terms of aligning from a values point of view, because of its anti-corruption record, no scandals over the 27 years, and there is a very consistent representation for those who cannot do things for themselves, and then, of course, things started happening as well with different investigations that had been initiated by the UDM. This is Friday. Saturday morning, I remember, Mr. Olomisa follows me on X.
Yes.
So I go on DM, I sent him a message. I said, I've been thinking, I'd like to talk to you about some matters of national importance. A few hours later, he responds. He says, right away, Prof. And he sends me his number. And that's how it happened.
Wow.
Yeah. And then a week later, I was welcomed.
Welcome to the party. Now, being a businessman and being a person that I know that you are, especially coming from an entertainment background, numbers are important.
Yeah.
So you look at a 78,000 vote party and you think, I want to add value to that at a national level. But now the responsibility maybe is even more now because you are looking at a 0.9% party provincially, 13,000 vote. And you need to add value to that. What number are you setting for yourself?
You know, Thabo, I think, look, there's different schools of thought about this. Yeah. One would be, some people would tell me, a lot of people have said this to me repeatedly now over the last few weeks, that, my God, you always like challenges, right? So that's the one view, that's the positivist view. But I think the other view is maybe I'm just a stupid kind of guy, right? I mean, and maybe somewhere in the middle we'll find the truth, right?
Right.
But I've always been a person who looks for what is good rather than what looks attractive. It's always been like that with me, with everything, even the businesses I've built. Right? And I think it's important that to come out because the businesses I've built, the time when I bought into a company called Talk IT and did a management buyout in 2001, 2002. I'd just come from Prime Media Music, actually, at the time. Had been launched, Thabo Kabelo, Panzula for Life. And I was looking for a different life. I was thinking, you know what, I want to move on. And I remember that when I looked at the company, it was a rubbish company. It really was, right? What was good about it? When I say rubbish, it was in the many millions of losses.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But what was good about it was a training company. And I thought, how can a training company be in trouble? Something's not right when the majority of our people need to be trained, but in a way that you can convert it into employability. Right? The rest, of course, is history in terms of that company because I got into it. And a lot of my friends, after I turned around, a lot of people that I met, even within the ICT sector, they were to tell me later, they said, hey, Mthunzi, we thought you'd beaten a little bit more than you can chew there, but we were not going to say it. Yeah. You know, they kept it to themselves. Yeah. Similar kind of thing. Yeah. I've done this many times. I went 2009 during the financial crisis. I lived in San Francisco. Having sold my company into a bigger group, I was responsible for 9 subsidiaries of that group. And one of the companies happened to be a company in San Francisco that was a very big contributor to the numbers of the group. About $60 million, in fact, it was contributing to the numbers of the group. And it was one of my subsidiaries, and it was in trouble. Yeah. So I went there to understand what was happening, spend some time. I turned it around. Yeah. So I'm what you would call somebody who looks at a good opportunity. And in this case, I wasn't looking for an opportunity. I was looking for something that is aligned to me, right? And I wasn't looking at the number 2, that there's 2 seats. For me, that was the last consideration. It was, what is it that draws me to this, as I've explained already? And then when, of course, I discovered the 2 seats, eventually, it's a sobering effect a bit. And I thought, okay, so how do we do this? And then I decided, okay, normally you have some time, turn around the company, do whatever, but this is 3 months one has. But I've always believed in good teams. So I started assembling a very good team that I would take with me to the UDM. So I said, okay, I see you've got what you've got, and I'm sure you've got good teams there, but can I bring something of what I think I will need? Okay. For example, very diverse teams of some very talented young people. One of them is a deputy president of a trade union, a very progressive trade union. One of them is a very seasoned corporate board person with huge experience in the public sector with DFIs and so on. One of them is a past private banker, and so on and so on, right? And also very diverse in terms of their, appreciation of the world, and also, some. If we have, for purpose of South Africa, I think this is important. If I was anywhere in the world, I'd be embarrassed. But I'm going to say it. Colored here, Indian there.
Yeah, for diversity purposes.
Exactly, for diversity purposes. Setswana, and so on and so on. Right? Yeah. And I thought I need a good team, and then fortune also does come along. You know, when you work hard, sometimes you get lucky too. Got a team that approached me from the thousands of people that have been coming onto my Twitter feed, onto my LinkedIn over the last few months. Thousands of people who have been telling me their stories about how inspired they are about my journey. As much as my journey was very painful for me, but it was inspiring them. And these young people came to me. They're from an ad agency and so on. They said, listen, we know you're okay and you don't seem to care much about whether people like you or not. You just do what you believe if you believe it's right. But could we manage your brand? So I said, why are you managing my brand? They said, no, we think we can do something with it. And then they suggested that I do a TikTok account. I said, but I've got enough. As it is, I'm struggling. I mean, like now, this afternoon, it took me about 5 hours just to check my messages, check my Twitter feed, because I like to know what's happening. I don't want to just completely let go, right? But anyway, I said, okay, I'll agree, but on one condition. You can manage my brand if you also manage my UDM journey. I said, if you do that, you can do me. Because me, I don't really feel I've got anything to prove to anybody. I've lived my life, rightly or wrongly. I've made decisions. I've been very successful at the things I've chosen to do as a human being, and so on. So
in a sense, you've put together a good team that is going to help you deal with that. I want to take a break, because when we come back, I want us to get into the real issues of you want to run the province. What is it that you want to bring to the province? United Democratic Movement's Gauteng Premier candidate, Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba, are with us. We are back in a moment. Live with you tonight on In Focus. We're in conversation with United Democratic Movement's Gauteng Premier candidate, just recently been announced as top of the list in the final candidate list announced by the IEC. Well, let's look at, in fact, rounding back to the conversation that you just had now of putting together skills. Right? The big challenge that the country is facing is one of crime, and certainly one that is a huge debate in this province of Gauteng. You want to run the province. What ideas do you have to deal with the lawlessness and the crime in this province?
I think when you say the biggest problem is crime, I want to agree but say that I do not believe that is the biggest alone. For me, especially from the statement we released this afternoon, you would see that the way I describe the problem of Gauteng is that as the largest province in South Africa, it certainly has to contribute a lot to the totality of South Africa. And if South Africa is on the precipice of a disastrous situation, which we are in, Gauteng is a big contributor in that and needs to lead also in the turnaround of the country. So I want to just preface it with that and give that as a context, that in my view, Gauteng is in as big a mess on a multiplicity of things. But now let me answer the one relating to crime. So, you know, one of the things I talked about today as I was announced was, you know, what other countries refer to as a happiness index. And for reasons that I just said, we rate very badly on all indices, right? The province and South Africa. So because of the high percentage and the concentration of the province in the totality, you find that, you know, it's a little bit of a mirror image. When you look at what is wrong, it's mostly Gauteng that has it is wrong. Gauteng, So when you look at a happiness index, it will be affected, of course, or influenced by so many things. The fear that people have in their homes, the fear that children get trafficked, the fear that women are subjected to gross treatment by men, gender-based violence, or what President Wetu also refers to as ukutwala, which is in our manifesto. That in itself you may not see as a crime, but you know what? It's a mental health challenge. It's a mental health attack when somebody else can just come and decide on the shoulder and take you home because I choose to, right? And all those variety. And then, of course, you've got the serious crime of somebody like the young player from Kaizer Chiefs who was killed the other day just because you want his car, right? And that's the other element about our crime, is that it's not necessarily that we are unique in having crime. we are unique in the very violent nature of our crimes, right? But somebody is likely to be killed for you to take a TV or to take whatever from him, or a wallet, which is a little bit complicated. And then also you have to look at the fact that there's also an element now of assassinations if people don't agree with you or you don't agree with them. Right. So for me, I think I go back again to our manifesto. Although our manifesto can't be the answer to everything, because we must prioritize the peculiarities of each area that we find and customize a response and a solution in our solution-orientedness. I would say for me, when you've looked at Singapore as a country, for me it's one of the most enticing countries in amongst all the countries I've gone to, because of where it comes from as a developmental country, because it's very difficult when you compare with developed countries. You end up looking and not comparing the same apple, in the box. But when you look at a country like Singapore that actually introduced that when you are involved and you are found to be guilty of a crime or corruption as a minister, you are going to jail. Yes. And depending on the severity of it, you could be actually go and hang, right? Yes. Secondly, when there is a punishable crime, there's no negotiation about it.
So consequence management
is very critical. And this is the problem we have in our countries, that there is no real accountability, because you can play the game. But you also know that because you have somewhat, I think, disenchanted sometimes police and there's some very good police. Yes. My brother is a policeman, so I don't want to speak ill of police. And I know some very big people in the police who are really trying. But in the majority, they're disenchanted because they're not paid well, they don't work good hours, they're not treated well, people are not respected, which is the other thing with us in developing countries. South Africa, is the disdain we have for people who perceive to be beneath us. This status orientation that is really sickening of our society, and which I find also maybe is also a long kind of psychological problem that we must deal with on another day on a psychological therapy level. But in terms of the crime, we need to be able to empower those people, the police. They must be empowered to do the right thing without political interference. Because one of the biggest problems in our country is that on every level, including with crime, is that there's political interference. There's somebody who's going to come and threaten you that if you do X against Mthunzi, you're likely not to have your job tomorrow, right? And so as a result, you have a combination of things. You have some kind of lackluster kind of approach to how you deal with it in your job, but also you have this thing of these dockets getting lost and going missing and disappearing. So there's a lot that is happening, I think, because of the looseness of the systems, and also the fact that you don't have a very strict regime that says there's zero tolerance for rubbish, right? That is what I would
management and I suppose remuneration
and enablement
of officers. I'm going to speak to my producer to give me more time. He'll tell me now if he agrees or not, because I want to talk to you. And I know you can go the whole day on this topic of skills, because that's your passion and training. So, but give me the headlines, right? We are spending some money now, 8.2 billion rands in Gauteng to train and prepare a future skills base, because we've got a master plan, we've got schools of specialization and so on and so forth. This is, of course, around employment. What would you do in that space?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me this question, to tell you the truth, because I struggle. You see, I have to separate myself from myself to deal with it properly, because there's some emotional content to it.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Give me the headline, because if we were to go into that,
so I need to be objective.
I
need to be objective here and say, okay, let's start with the fact that when this project was announced, it was quite fascinating to watch, because there are some naysayers who've never believed that when I have a project where I say I want 5 billion to create over 700,000 jobs, some people say, what? What is that? How are you supposed to do that? You have an unregistered company. So And it took a long time for me to unpack it and explain to people how it's supposed to work, based really on experience and knowledge of a number of years, and the fact that as a business person who understands human capital development, it's something I've studied for a long time, from the days that I owned Talk IT and the continuum of traveling the whole world and doing stuff, right? So I want to give that as a background first. But it was heartening and very fascinating when now people were writing messages to me and saying, isn't that your project? Didn't you say it looks like that? Did you? I promise you it was happening. And I was ignoring it, right? I was determined to ignore it, actually. Because I looked at it, I thought, yeah, it looks like it. It sounds like it, but it's not it, right? And so ultimately I did a statement, and because it's important. So when you are going to run a program where you create jobs, you can see the way this one is phrased. It says they are offering training opportunities and job creation opportunities. That's very careful. If you read it, it's careful. It's not sustainable jobs. And it will not be sustainable jobs. Because like listening to Panyaza talking about it, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I promise you. I was listening to him. I was thinking, okay, don't be biased. Listen to the guy. And he talks about, he's got 8.2 billion. It can't be just doing it for campaigning. They are going to create 500,000 jobs this weekend. Hara hara. He's talking absolute nonsense. Okay? And he invited the Department of Labor. It's going to give him the 8.2 billion. Now, this is the very Department of Employment and Labor that said, can't give you 5 billion because we don't understand what you're talking about. Right? But we'll give you 8.2 billion Gauteng. And you'll remember I've always made a point about how there's going to be a looting spree coming. And for me, that's just a looting spree. It's a way of getting monies to go in some places, because there is no way they are going to create jobs that are similar to the Presidential Youth Initiative. You can see this is also on a provincial level. It's mimicking what has been happening at the Presidential Youth Initiative, where they train jobs for 1 year as assistant teachers. At the end of the year, the job is finished. And I know so many people who will tell you this, that the jobs are finished, then they have to go to the UIF and claim. Now, the model we had put together was a model that had an ecosystem that saves the UIF from having to pay any more money, so that you are able to build its reserves and also get a lot of money coming through from the jobs you've created. These ones take away. They took the money. I can't remember how much of the 23.8 billion was taken from the surplus of the UIF. So basically, we are doing the same thing we're doing to electricity, doing the same thing we're doing to water. You're doing it to UIF monies. We're going to have no money in the future. And skills training. Again, Misufi kept on saying, we are training. Haven't you been to UJ, and haven't you been, he mentioned another university.
People graduating.
Where people are graduating. I mean, these are not the same things. I'm sorry. I chaired a university. Chaired the University of the Western Cape, so I also know university processes, quite frankly, right? And the jobs we are talking about, skills on the ground, are not knowledge that you get from university. Yes, you marry them, ultimately. It's very important to marry those when you're creating jobs that are sustainable. But in this particular instance, one thing you don't do that we've done for many years in this country is to train for the sake of training. Because what that does, at Productivity SA, for example, we had to salvage a few programs that were being run by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, training, and then some guys bought Maseratis and disappeared with the money, and then we had to finish the training and make sure that it can be converted to employment. So training to ensure it's converted into employability on a sustainable business is very different from training in the hope that you will find a job somewhere. You don't know where. Particularly when you haven't done an audit and you don't understand the needs. He talks about a master plan. But I was trying to figure out which master plan is he talking about, Lusufi, when he talks about a master plan.
A skills master plan with a database of the skills that are required in industry, I suppose.
And then how do you bring...
To marry those skills to those opportunities.
And where's the industry?
Well, I mean, it's everywhere.
And this is the problem. You see, the problem that we've always had is that people train in a vacuum, right? And assume they understand the needs of the industry. And in assuming that it starts with education. You educate, hoping that you are educating for the industry. But you don't call the industry to the table to say, listen, come here. This is what we believe you need.
Yeah.
Is it correct?
Yeah.
And
in
then
2 minutes, because
and when you've trained,
if we are to do it right, what are we supposed to do?
If we're to do it right, we need to build ecosystems the way we built our ecosystem. Ecosystems that clearly ensure that as you train, you have an ability to mentor, coach, convert some who are retrenched, for example, from mining to fiber, to telecoms, or from telecoms to agriculture if there is no space anymore to absorb them. And then carry them, handhold them into the future of work. That's the other thing we haven't done. We have no policy in this country on employment. We have no employment policy, no industrial policy, no AI, fourth industrial revolution, future of work policy, zero. Good, right? So you need to incubate, handhold people, put them into the value chains, make sure they have access to finance. DFIs must stop being funders of last resort and be funders of first resort, because then private sector can come and partner. But when you ask private sector to do it and you stand there and you say it's the developmental state, what do you mean by developmental state? That's how you must do it.
Appreciate your time. Let's leave it there. Thank you very much for coming on. That is the UDM's Gauteng Premier Candidate, Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba.